This is Steve Robinson, Howie's executive producer, filling in for him as he's off today, slaving away on Kennedy Babylon 2. And joining us now on the Howie Carr Show, as she does pretty much every Monday, is Ann Coulter, the New York Times bestselling author. Ann, thank you for joining us here on the Howie Carr Show.
That bum, he's at the beach.
Trust me, no, Howie Carr is not at the beach. If you saw how pale his legs are, you know he hates sun about as much as a vampire does. But I really liked your column, and I definitely want to get into it because I think you make just one very, very interesting point about the liberal outrage over the child separation policy down at the border. But first of all, Ann, I got to get your take on Sarah Jeong and the furor that erupted over the weekend where, she's appointed to the the week, it was Friday, where she's appointed to the editorial board at the New York Times. And it turns out, you know what? She really, really hates white people.
No, it's really stunning. I mean, it not only are I would argue some of the tweets, just if that was were the only tweets she had ever sent, are so ugly. Cancel all white people, that sort of thing. Every ideal white men have ever had, we need to exterminate them. But even beyond that, it's the sheer volume of them. Some of these guys I've retweeted have apparently spent days going back and looking through her Twitter feed. It's a psychological compulsion. Obviously she is desperate to date white males, and all she can do is think about it and keep denouncing white males, white males, white males. I mean, every little thing is the fault of white males. So not only is she a psycho, and a racist psycho, but the New York Times, I believe at one point they were saying they were reconsidering hiring her for their editorial board. But they don't worry, they withdrew it, saying that they had this BS excuse, and I love when the newspaper of record openly lies to us,
which is often.
No, she was just parodying the people attacking her.
Exactly.
And so, these people have gone through and looked at her tweet. She wasn't responding to anything.
Yeah, and
she'd go out for dim sum and denounce white people. It had nothing to do with responding to anything. But I mean, as I tweeted, I think in the end, it's ugly, it's awful, but I think it's fantastic for conservatives because I wasn't joking when I said she will fit right in on the New York Times editorial board, and them keeping her for liberals is the equivalent for us if Roy Moore had won.
That's a good point. You're right, yeah.
A flaming, embarrassing example, and they have her.
And there's going to be a problem for her, Ann, though, because I don't know if you've looked at the demographic profiles of the New York editorial board, but, I mean, when she sits down...
Yes, I have. It looks like a Benetton ad.
Yeah, when she sits down for that first meeting, she's going to be smelling dog, right? How is she going to get over the stench?
Not too many white men, actually. They're very... What annoys me, as I have also... been screaming from the rooftops and also alluded to subtly in some of my tweets. I am the enraging thing about diversity and integration is no, that's not what this was ever about. Actually, it was about integration, not about diversity and multiculturalism. This is pushing the black experience aside. I'm sorry, black people have a special place in America. They were brought here, and I mean African Americans, not an immigrant who comes in and happens to have dark skin. No, but the African Americans who've been in this country for centuries, they got the short end of the stick for a few centuries. We changed constitutional provisions. We changed rules about property rights. They can tell us, no, we don't want you to use these words. Set-asides for African Americans, affirmative action. For African Americans, okay, fine, yes, they deserve it. I mean, I think some of these policies are counterproductive, but that's a separate point. But where, why, when do, you have ties arriving on Friday and on Monday announcing, I noticed there are no ties on the evening broadcast. Well, screw you! We didn't do anything to you. How did immigrants come in and piggyback on the black experience in America? That is nothing but an anti-white American policy. That is pure anti-whiteness. And again, I mean, I point this out even though it's an utter an utter digression in my book, but I was citing, I think it was an Indian woman with some like fancy diversity job up at Harvard, and it has nothing to do with the book, but I just dropped a footnote saying, note to black people, all the good affirmative action jobs are going to people who didn't come here on slave ships. I mean, I'd be really ticked off if I were in Africa. No, this is for them.
Well, I mean, Harvard has a long tradition, though. Harvard has a long tradition of giving away jobs that should be going to immigrants or to people who actually deserve them, people who are actually discriminated against, historically marginalized communities, a la Elizabeth Warren.
How did immigrants get in that sentence?
Sorry, I meant marginalized people, Native Americans. Native Americans, okay, I think, exist in the same category along with African Americans. I was just taking a shot at Indians. I was just taking a shot at Elizabeth Warren,
and I will give you African Americans. That's it. No, there is no reason for someone who came to our country of their own volition, and we were nice enough to let them in. Oh, now they get positions and places at Harvard over native-born Americans, actual Americans, white Americans, and that is what is happening. It is anti-whiteism being disguised as being snuck through on. As if it's part of civil rights. No! Civil rights is for black people. The end. Good night.
All right, I want to turn to your column. This is published on August 1st. The ACLU won't rest until every illegal gets in. And, it's available at your website and various other places that carry your column. And I thought the funny point that you make is that despite all the outrage, I mean, I guess like the TV dominating, the all-encompassing outrage, it took over the White House press briefing for a couple of days in a row. It took over social media, and it was the policy at the border of, separating children from their parents because of this old court case. It was happening under the Obama administration. The mainstream media just happened to realize that it was also happening under the Trump administration. But then when we have these congressional hearings, as we did last week, focused on the child separation policy, not a peep. There was no coverage of it. We didn't hear anything about it. So what the hell's going on, Ann?
Absolutely right. It was a matter of luck, as my devoted followers know. I am a late sleeper, so I just happened to wake up, and both MSNBC and CNN were in a commercial break, so I switched over to C-SPAN, and luckily the hearing had just begun. It went on for like 2 hours. It's all the officials from Homeland and ICE and Border Patrol and I don't even know what at all. Oh, HHS, because they're involved in how the kids are kept. Answering actual questions, and all this new information is coming out. I kept flipping over to see is MSNBC must be glued to this hearing. They're obsessed with what's happening at the border. But among the interesting things that came out at this hearing, that not only does no one know, but the entire media, as far as I can tell. I mean, I guess our side didn't know the truth, and their side knows nothing. So in addition to knowing nothing, they don't want to know anything. But for one thing, I think everyone does know the reason the children are separated from their parents is that in a, quote, settlement, this is like these consent decrees where you have non-adversarial apparently, on paper, adverse parties. So you have, whenever there's a Democratic administration, the Department of Justice is constantly entering into consent decrees with ACLU. No, don't throw me in the briar patch, anything but that. So that they agree to things they want to do, that is to say, the government agrees to things that a liberal Democrat wants to agree to anyway, but as if they're being forced to by a liberal Democrat organization like the ACLU. That's what happened in the case of this settlement where a district court judge said children coming across the border illegally can't be held for more than 20 days. Well, the head of ICE, or one of the top guys at ICE, I don't know what his title was, an official at ICE, said that the average when we detain them at the border, we need 30 to 40 days to have the hearing. The judge has to issue the order. Either they're removed or they get asylum. Most of them end up being removed. He said that costs about $1,600 to the taxpayer. If we release them, it costs $75,000 per removal because they don't come back, or they come back to the hearing but they aren't detained. In any event, the kids can't be detained more than 20 days. They have to go. So either you have a district court judge saying, well, if they came with an adult who's claiming to be a parent, they have to go too, or they're going to be separated. That's just inevitable. And then, shockingly, hundreds of these alleged parents, AKA coyotes and
exactly,
drug dealers,
and that's what they're finding out, that they do DNA testing, and it turns out that there's no biological relationship between the child and the quote unquote parent.
Yes. So hundreds of them have gone home without their children.
Which seems like a plausible thing. You know, you love your kids, so you just abandon them in a foreign nation. That seems like something that a normal Western person would do.
Right. Well, even dragging them up to the border. I mean, they have to go through thousands of miles. They have to risk facing coyotes and bandits and actual, live coyotes.
I would call it child abuse.
On 4 legs, not 2.
I would think it's child abuse just to put a child through that.
Back, in order to blame the Trump administration for the ones who went back without their quote children. The headlines, New York Times, Washington Post, Huffington Post, they all said, oh, the Trump administration tricked them into signing a form they didn't understand. Well, I found out at the hearing that apparently I alone in the world watched. Guess who wrote the form? The ACLU.
And you won't find that in the New York Times. You won't find that on CNN. You won't find that on MSNBC. And I think that very fact tells you everything you need to know about this manufactured outrage that we spent, that was a long outrage cycle. The outrage cycles are kind of short these in the Trump administration. But that was like a solid week and a half of outrage that we had to endure.
Oh, yes, and I think it's going to keep going because, as I have pointed out many times before, the number one goal of the left, the number one goal is to just keep dragging the third world in. And then they'll never have to worry about another election. Which
is why we need to build the wall, Ann. So, hey, we gotta talk about your book. What's the title of your new book that's coming out?
Why, thank you for asking. Resistance is Futile. How the Trump-hating left lost its collective mind. It comes out in less than 3 weeks, I think, or 3 weeks exactly. It's August 21st.
Now, you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist as far as I know, but I think that you are qualified to diagnose the leftist losing their mind in this instance. And you're going to be coming up to New Hampshire on September 16th, doing a show with Howie and Corey Lewandowski in Concord, New Hampshire. People can buy tickets right now if they go to HowieCarShow.com. What do you have in store for people who buy tickets to come to the show, Ann?
Well, I think it's a really good book. I've read some of the other. I mean, I think I love all my books. They're all my children. But this has a lot of new things that people have not noticed because, as you know, I am a fanatical researcher, and it is pretty stunning. A lot of the lies we have been told. I think my book is funner, quicker, doesn't get down into the weeds. And it's much shorter than it looks. I'm appealing to the Twitter generation, as always, and, half the book is footnotes, short chapters, lots of headings, very quick read.
All right, Ann Coulter, thanks for joining us here on the Howie Carr Show. Your new book is Resistance is Futile, and it'll be available in, a month or so. And we'll make sure that let people... 3 weeks. We'll make sure we let people know where they can go to get it. Thanks a lot, Ann. Appreciate you being here on the Howie Carr Show.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye.